Welcome to the SIWIKE Podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE Podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
We're here again with our guest host, Eram, who will dive a little bit more into nursing school today. So a lot of folks are interested in hearing about her experiences, and we want to touch on like what is a day like in nursing school. So if we go through the process of I just registered, I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to get started in learning all this great stuff that I have, what does kind of nursing school entail? What is a day like, and how does one go along being successful in that whole endeavor?
Hi, Lukey. Thanks for having me back again. So basically, when you get accepted into nursing school, you're probably going to feel hyped. You're like, whoa, okay, I got in. It's a very competitive program. It really is. There's a lot of people that want to get in. Some schools look at activities and other things that you do. Some ask for, additional supplementary application materials. And of course, they do look at your grade point average or your GPA before you go in. So when you go in on your first day is basically going to be kind of like your Frosh day, or your week will be like a Frosh week, in the sense that you basically try to get to know your professors. You get kind of affiliated and acquainted with like nursing students that were in first year, and they kind of give you a sense of what first year was like for them and what second year is like and the vast difference. You kind of get to know people. You kind of just, you sit wherever and you kind of get to know people. And if you already know somebody, then, well, that's a bit of a plus because you're kind of going into it together. You just get acquainted with, new people that are like around you. And, you just kind of get to know each other. And, usually during the first week or first several days, you not only get to know each other, you get to know your surroundings. So you're trying to get used to the surroundings, what is going to be the expectations of nursing school. So what's expected of you during the semester and for the whole year. They'll probably give you a course syllabus and an outline, in terms of what books you need to buy, what you need to study. You probably will get a sense of how it will get hectic because you will have to study. There will be times where you have to study for exams and you're going to have massive assignments due and things like that.
Right.
And of course, the important things are like your clinical competency workshops. So basically being tested before and being evaluated by clinical instructors before you go out in the field to actually practice as a nursing student and have live hands-on experience, like real-time experience with patients and families and other healthcare professionals and staff in hospitals or long-term care facilities. So you kind of get like the feel for it during the first few days or first week, so to speak.
Cool. So if we walk through kind of term by term or year by year in terms of like what folks can look forward to. So is like the first term mostly academic? It's mostly kind of bookish exams and tests, or are the courses themselves, are they more like exam based, more practicals? I don't know what an assignment in nursing school, do they have those things? Do they have like capstone stuff? So what would be like first term? What could folks expect to encounter in their first term or first year in nursing school?
So in your first semester of your first year, you will have a lot of simulation labs as well. Like, I mean, actually, this kind of goes throughout during your first and your second year in nursing school. Okay. So you will have a lot of practice or simulation labs where you'll get to practice how to do injections. You will practice doing assessments. In my first year, I remember assessments was key for you to be ready in your second year, because when you go into your second year, your clinical hours and your exposure get longer, and you actually get assigned particular patients where you have to understand diagnoses and pathophysiology and what happens when that pathophysiology is reversed. So normal versus abnormal in different diagnoses, and pharmacology is a big thing in your second year. But in your first year, you have like more of assessment, and it's more like on healthy people, or so to speak, more like your friends and your colleagues. And you get to learn more about vital signs. You get an introduction in anatomy and physiology. like, what's the importance of doing certain tests and certain assessments. They'll actually do an exam, a final assessment exam, where you'll do a full head to toe exam, and you're expected to do that within 15 minutes, because that's kind of like the expectation when you're working and when you've actually graduated as a future registered nurse. Is how do you assess somebody? What is a focused assessment? How do you know when to do a head to toe versus a focused assessment on someone? They'll give you that information. Written assignments can be more like trying to do more like an essay type of a structure thing, where they may ask you to get more used to doing research articles, peer-reviewed journals, versus, or even do literature reviews, to kind of critique literature and try to give your opinion in terms of what you think this article has in terms of flaws. What would you support about this article? What would you improve more about this article? You will take courses like psychology, biology. You do have the option for electives as well. You need a bit of that breather, but the electives can also kind of give you a sense of understanding your patient populations. So more of, I guess, more of the different generational concepts of the type of patients that you're going to be encountering. So, the baby boomers, Generation Z, Y, millennials, etc. So kind of seeing where people come from, trying to understand socioeconomic status, social determinants of health. You will also probably take courses in nutrition. So trying to understand why nutrition is important and how that actually can affect someone's physiology and anatomy, and how that can actually be a problem sometimes when people come in or patients come in. So in terms of healthcare, like what would why is it important for a diabetic to have a specific diet? Why is it important for someone who's undergoing dialysis to have a specific diet? What should we be aware of, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be more like your first year. Your second year, like I stated earlier, would be more intense clinicals, more in-depth analysis and studying for pathophysiology exams, pharmacology. You will have an elective or two to take to kind of have that breather. But again, it's to understand things, to have more of a broadened horizon. You will take different types of psychology courses. The one that I took back in second year was more like on aging. So it was more like elderly populations and understanding how, how to interact and communicate with them, how their behavioral psychology is different from someone of my age group versus a 4-year-old, for example.
Right.
Yeah. In your third year is more paper-based. You also do have clinical rotations, but you'll be reporting more to a faculty advisor. So it's kind of like you're more independent, but you will be assigned a lot of papers. That was my experience in my third year. And it was very assignment-based. You had to do a lot of reflections, introspections, analysis, a lot of literature review, more of community-based settings, and they go more in depth in social determinants of health. That was a very, very big thing in third year. And then in your fourth year, it's purely clinical based. So you're completely independent. You go to your clinical, you are a nursing student, but you have a preceptor that will report, or multiple preceptors depending on your clinical rotation. And so with my clinical rotation, when I remember it, was I had multiple preceptors that would have to evaluate. Sorry?
A preceptor is
basically like a mentor. So there's somebody that's assigned with you that has a student, and they basically evaluate your performance when you're providing nursing care, but you're still a nursing student. You just have less the expectation is you have less guidance involved. I mean, you'll still have the guidance and you can still go to them for questions, but there's less guidance involved versus when you were in first year. And what you'll notice is that you become so autonomous and so independent over those 4 years. And that's what's expected of in your fourth year, is that you're completely independent. Perhaps that might be the placement for you. Perhaps that might be the job for you. You may be offered a job by the manager on the unit or the facility that you're working at. Or maybe that just might be your interest, or maybe that might not be. But purely and strictly clinicals, which could be a combination of days, nights, evenings, weekends. It really depends when your preceptor is working.
Wow, sounds like a lot of information there, and very interesting, because I actually thought that what you mentioned in third year, it was a lot more kind of literature based or paper based. I would have thought that was kind of first year where you kind of rack up the knowledge and the understanding. It sounds like in your first year, you're already doing like simulations, like trying to inject folks and, and things like that, and diagnosing stuff right in your first year. So that's amazing. And then you're always, I guess, ramping up in terms of time that you're spending in the clinical setting, to your point of trying to get as autonomous as possible, where you have folks, these preceptors that are giving you some guidance and understanding. But by fourth year, you really should be more informing them versus actually asking them kind of questions, and should be autonomous. So that sounds like a very interesting experience. Out of what you've done, what would you say that you enjoyed the most out of the experience, and what were some of the more challenging things, and maybe how you could have overcome those challenges?
I think that the things that I really enjoyed were, I guess I don't really regret choosing the profession that I did.
Okay.
I don't. But what I really remember is how I made friends.
Okay.
And it was really important to have those support systems when you're in nursing school. But I think in general, it's very important to have a friend. It really is, especially in nursing school, because it can get really tough. Like there's weeks where you're going to be reading pages and pages, and you've got assignments due, and you've got this due. And if you have a part-time job, you have to commit to that. And of course, your personal responsibilities. So I think it's really important to have that social support system, because it not only helps you to blow off steam or de-stress and talk and things like that, but you also help each other. Like it's really important to do that, is to actually bring each other up, not to bring each other down.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to, if, for example, you're not well and you can't go to class one day, for example, and you have a friend, well, they can give you those notes, and vice versa. And this is how you help each other out. Or if there's something that you don't understand, or you're making study notes, you make a group of friends, and then giving each other study notes is a way to actually support each other as well.
For sure. And were you the type where you created kind of these study groups and taught each other? Because I've heard that probably the most effective way to learn is to teach someone else, right? Because that really expresses how well you know that subject matter. In addition to you knowing it, you have to explain it to someone else so that they understand it. Did you do stuff like that, or what were some of the kind of learning techniques or learning habits that you had that helped make consuming all this information a little bit easier for you?
Well, I think it's that what we all did was we attempted to study as much as we could before class. And if we couldn't, we did it after class, and we reviewed the important aspects of it. What was really important was booking simulation times after class or outside of class. That was really important. As a group of friends, we would do that, or myself, or usually it was mainly a group thing. And what we would do is we would practice for our simulation exams. So assessment exams, simulation exams, and I really liked those the most, to be honest with you, because it really gave you an insight of basically why I part of my interest was going into healthcare and in nursing. And even in medicine, students in medical school, they had to do assessment exams as well. So, and it's a fun part because you have fun and you laugh. But it's really interesting because it kind of gives you insight in terms of what's normal, what's abnormal. But what we would do is we'd say, okay, so that was a good assessment, but just remember you have to do this, this, and this, because if you don't, you'll not only get docked points for it, but this is the reason why we assess for these things. So don't forget to mention this, this, and this. And so that's what we would do. And we would write notes, and and that's how we supported each other. And that's how we scored well for our assessment exams.
Right. So it sounds like finding a good group of friends that are really into the learning part of it. So they're willing to kind of schedule that extra time to practice the simulations and all of that, to help each other study and kind of quiz each other and all that sort of stuff. So having that support structure and kind of like-minded folks that are willing to learn as well with you is something important. What about some of the challenging bits? So were there any like concepts or areas or simulations that you kind of struggled with, where like I just could not find that injection point, or just whatever, just to share some of like those more challenging moments, because sometimes it sounds like everybody does it so easily, everybody does it so effortlessly, but are there any kind of struggles or trials and tribulations that you'd be willing to share that can help folks that might be going through that process themselves?
So, I mean, the thing is I think sometimes people go through things personally that we don't really know about.
Okay.
And I think that can really contribute to a lot of the difficulty that people have sometimes. So again, just try to support one another. That's a very important thing. For myself, for example, when I was in my second year, I had a lot going on where I had family members that were very sick, and I was trying to juggle school and, juggle work and, juggle my family life to make sure that, everybody was okay at home. But I think the times that were really frustrating were, and it was, I think it was just the fact that it was really tiresome sometimes to have to get up like really like at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, depending on where your clinical was. Sometimes we get up a little earlier to review things, go in early to a clinical, like it's dark outside, you're going into clinical. You have to go review patient charts, see diagnoses, see medications, anything that's changed, kind of sit down and review before your instructor comes in. And then, of course, run the full 12-hour shift. So it was a real experience of what 12 hours would be like for you. Of course, the instructor would sometimes take us off the floor, maybe like 2 hours early. So let's just say like 10 hours, we'd have that exposure. And then we'd have our post conferences. And in our post conferences, you'd have to answer questions. You'd have to be paying attention. You'd have to be, those were expectations. You had projects that you had to submit to this clinical instructor. You had to do presentations for this clinical instructor. And I think at times felt like it was very overwhelming with the amount of work. And, sometimes people can feel this, and this is natural. When you feel, naturally, when you feel overwhelmed, you sometimes feel like your intellect is challenged. So, and it's not even the fact that someone doesn't have that level of intellect. It's just so overwhelming. And when you have so much on your plate, well, how much can you devour off that plate in a certain time period is the next question, right? So I think that those can be some posing challenges at times. And I think my piece of advice would be, again, make sure you have a good support group, a good group of friends. Try to take it one step at a time. And when they actually say study smart, not hard, that's a very important key factor. It really is, because you don't want to overstudy things that you're not going to be tested on, or facts that are irrelevant. You don't need to know. Know the important things, know the important facts. In terms of why we can't get things sometimes, again, it's because we're overwhelmed, or it's that something just doesn't, there's a missing link and something just doesn't make sense. So what I would suggest to do is try to understand what your learning style is. So learning styles are very important. And sometimes having those group of friends with similar learning styles is also a good thing too. Or even new suggestions from these friends is very important. If you're an auditory learner, going to class and listening is a very important thing. Maybe asking the professor, can I please record your lecture, is really important. Even like recording yourself and listening to it, through your earbuds while you're on the train, for example, or while you're driving, before a test, or just in general after class or before class, can really help you. If you're a visual learner, concept maps are a big thing. If you're someone that is a kinesthetic learner, then maybe a lot of the hands-on experience and trying to, understand why things work the way they work, and looking at visual diagrams can also sometimes be a combination and help you. So that's my piece of advice on it.
That's amazing. So it sounds like there's a lot's going on, and it's natural to feel that feeling of overwhelm with everything going on. What would you say are kind of some tricks to kind of balance clinical and classes, and Are there things that you did to like recharge to make sure? Because hopefully you were able to take weekends and spend a little bit of like recovery time. Or are there other kind of tips and techniques that you would share in order to help people balance all the different things that they have on the go?
Try not to cram material in, like try not to completely cram material in. Try to, when you do papers, try to start them as early as possible so you're not cramming it in the night before. In terms of recharging, please don't drink 50 Red Bulls. That's not advisable. That's not advisable. That's not healthy. Eat healthy. If you want to de-stress, take a walk. I know it's a little challenging at this time because everyone's supposed to be, physically distancing because of the pandemic and whatnot. Do some yoga, do some stretching. If you work out, try to work out, try to exercise, listen to some music. If you feel that you've been studying a lot, and you feel like you need to take a break, watch a movie, watch an episode of a show. Other things people find therapeutic are doing housework. Sometimes it really helps. If you're a musician, if you're an amateur musician or a professional one, it doesn't matter. If you have a guitar, play the guitar for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, get something to eat while you're at it. We can't always be perfect. We do strive for 100%, but we can't always get that. So just try to remember that, you can only do so much and you can only do your best. Mm-hmm. And this goes for all healthcare professionals. It doesn't matter who you are.
Sure. So if you're able to go back and do a couple things differently, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 things differently, knowing what you went through, what are some of the things that you would definitely change and adjust?
I think that what I would have done was to have more self-care for myself.
Okay.
And I think what's also important is to be around positive people.
Okay.
Being around positive people is very, very important. You don't want to be around people that are going to give off bad vibes or people that are going to be toxic to your mentality because you're already going through so much. Like it's so overwhelming. Like nursing school itself is so overwhelming. And, when people, don't think that, no, you better think otherwise. It's very overwhelming. It is tough. Nursing is not an easy profession. It really is not. And school itself was not. You want to be around people who are going to, like I said, lift you up, not bring you down. Right. So I think that's very important, and having self-care. So making sure that you eat right, that you're taking care of yourself, that you're, de-stressing by taking part in activities. But I think what's also important is sometimes it becomes so overwhelming that you need someone to talk to. So I think what's important is talking to someone that you trust. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could even be a coworker. It really could. It could be, who knows who it could be, but you really need that. And I think that's really important. So if I were to do anything, it would be de-stressing, helping myself to de-stress. I feel like at times I had stressed for like no reason. And I think it was just, I think it was just the fact that I was worried about, whether I was going to, really get through it or not, because it was tough. So I think self-care is very important, taking time for myself, taking one step at a time, especially in my second year, that was really tough sometimes. Not overwhelming myself with information would have been much more helpful. I mean, yes, I know bits and odd ends of other information, but I should have just probably stuck to, what was more relevant, which I did. But I mean, I think it would have just been more important at the time. And again, I was surrounded by good people. I really was. But I think that at times I was exposed to individuals that didn't really have a positive mindset. So, I mean, I think the good news was that I was able to get that, able to inform myself immediately, like this person could be really toxic. So I would just step away and say, okay, sayonara, not Yeah, you're not in my positive circle. You're not in my energy. You're not in my positive energy space. So, yeah, I mean, it was a good thing that I was able to identify that immediately. But I think what I would have done, much more differently was not to get so preoccupied with the fact of the things that were said to me, or things that specific individuals would say about other things, and just have a negative mindset about everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, what comes to mind is that quote of "you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with." So, making sure that those 5 people have that positive attitude, they're kind of diligent, they want to do the work, they want to be successful, they want to do their best and put their best foot forward and all that sort of stuff. Not the ones that are always like on Netflix binging or going out drinking and whatever, right? You can do that once in a while, but if that's every time, then that obviously starts accumulating. So that positivity is definitely a great thing. And I would encourage folks to do kind of a relationship audit, right? To see like who are the people that are kind of the pluses or the minuses around you. And it doesn't mean that you kind of fire your friends. It's just maybe you spend an extra hour with the plus and one less hour with the minus, right? Just from an energy draining thing. And then in terms of things like the not stressing too much, I think it's very easy for folks to say that and recommend that, but in the moment it's really challenging. So things that I found to be helpful are just as simple as taking a deep breath, right? Do 3 breaths, do 10 breaths if you can. Get into the habit of things like meditation and mindfulness, right? Because those things are ones where if you're thinking about the present, you're not stressing about the exam, the assignment, the clinical, the whatever that's happening in the future. And you're not fearful about like, oh, what if this and that happens again? And you're really focused on what you can do right now. So I think all those are great tips and bits of feedback for folks. So having gone through, I guess that nursing school and learning, if you were, I guess, an instructor, where I guess you do teach,
Yeah.
And the system is kind of set up how it is, but like if you were to be able to kind of change the system and had free reins, like here you go, Eram, go build nursing school from the bottom up. Like, what might you do differently, or what are some of the key things that, hey, I found that this was really helpful in learning, and this not so much, or whatever? What are some of the components that would make for an even better learning experience?
So if it really was up to me to revamp a curriculum, like for nursing school, I think what's really important is a lot of hands-on experience.
Okay.
And I think more variations in different areas would be helpful for nursing students. So I would say that when I was in my first year, we had very limited, like we had clinical experience, but it was limited. It became more in our second year. I think that had we had it in our first semester of first year, I think that would have been more beneficial. So I think more clinical experience is key. And I think having various exposures everywhere is very, very important. Like, if they had like first semester, for example, in your first year, well, then I would have done like maybe some rehab placements and long-term care placements in the first semester of first year. But in the second semester, I would say, let's start getting these guys exposed more to hospital settings. Okay. So, we can continue on with rehab in hospitals, but let's do like acute medicine and some other places as well. And like maybe, like those would be a couple of examples. In the second year, having further clinical exposure in hospitals. So for example, again, post-operative floors, medicine, oncology, cardiology, having those exposures, and then probably going and then touching a bit more into the other specialty areas, like probably like labor and delivery, the postpartum units, those would be a couple of examples. The third year is more community-based, but that doesn't mean you still can't have exposure. So kind of getting people out there, working with, women's shelters, working with addictions, mental health, like CAMH, even working in clinics within hospitals, working with pregnant women in, clinics in the hospitals, for example, just having a variety of these types of exposures, like having that variety is really, really important because it kind of gives you a sense and taste of what's out there. I guess, like, you have a rainbow of opportunity or a kaleidoscope of opportunities to see things. So I think that that's what I would change. Now in fourth year, I think fourth year should be more like, it could be assigned, which was what had happened at the time, which was, this is where you're going to be assigned for this first semester, and then this is where you're going to be assigned the second semester. But the other opportunity that was presented was actually picking your own clinical, but going in for an interview, having your CV or your resume ready, having a letter of intent ready, going in for an interview, being interviewed by that specific facility, by the manager, by, a few preceptors. It was like a panel for me. The educator, the manager, a few senior nurses, even having a physician on the panel asking you questions. That was a real taste of, whoa, okay, so this is what it would be like for me to go on an interview and get a job, but this is just getting a placement. So, asking me specialized questions, like, I was getting into critical care and cardiology or advanced care and cardiology. So this is what I had in my final year. And of course, they looked at your GPA, asked you questions about, like, your experiences, what gave you clinical scenarios, what you would do. So that was a really good opportunity. That's what I really liked. And of course, if you were going to be I was rotating around. I had quite an interesting rotation, with critical care and cardiology rotations throughout different aspects of cardiology, seeing things like cardioversions and, interesting things, or emergency department exposure as well. Seeing a pacemaker insertion, seeing a stent put in a cath lab. That was amazing, things like that. So, that fourth year should be like completely independent. And that's what's expected of. You're going to see the spectrum of how you change over time, where you were like, you first walked in, you're like, what do I do with this? And then, you're in your fourth year and you're like, I know exactly what that is. I know exactly what I'm doing. And you just kind of take control. So I think, and then of course, reporting to a faculty advisor. So I think that's the way I would revamp it, is more exposure. Because I feel like a lot of people, when they graduated, they still felt like they were not heavily comfortable. Even though that last year was kind of like the most clinical exposure, I would still say, I don't think nursing school is entirely enough. You have a lot to learn even when you're done nursing school. When you go out there, you're always learning. It's always a heavy learning process. So I think also the other things that need to be included, in my opinion, would be medications, and why we give more of the aspect of antidotes. I think more like we were taught medications, but more focus on antidotes and why we give them. And what would you expect to see further in this type of a pathophysiological response, or like what would be more expected if you were to see this happen and that happen. And I think more information on cardiac arrests and things like that. I think that's my opinion on things. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of good learning. And with any of the schooling, it's never perfect because it's kind of catered to everybody. So as much as folks can take ownership of their own learning and self-direct in terms of the areas that they want to get into, and hopefully finding great people, great mentors to learn from as well, so that they can get that more specialized learning, I think would be great. And it sounds like much more that practical experience where, yeah, simulations are great, but the more that you can relate with real people in real environments, then that autonomy comes sooner, instead of waiting until kind of fourth year and then you're actually out of school and you're like, oh, is this it? Am I supposed to be able to stand on my own 2 feet? And I think you have a good point where continuing the learning, where nursing school might give you a good foundation, but that's not the end of your education, right? You should constantly be learning and growing and keeping up with new trends and things happening. And that goes outside of nursing and pretty much in any job as well, if you want to really excel in whatever area you're in. So I think that's a lot of great information and advice. And I guess, are there any other things that you wish you knew earlier, or other things that you'd share with yourself for someone who's going through nursing school?
Well, we did have a student union that kind of gave us some insight, like, oh, if you're interested in this type of nursing, come and listen to this speaker and that speaker. But I mean, what I wish was that they kind of would offer that like as a webinar as well, because not everybody was always on campus to meet up with a faculty advisor and had different class dates. And I just think that it was not very convenient for a lot of us. So I wish that they had something like that. I wish that I had more mentors that I could kind of go to and ask more information about, job opportunities, so to speak, because I think a lot of people were more into that. The more the objective was to complete your nursing degree. You graduate, you have to study for an NCLEX exam, or at the time it was a CRNE, but now it's the NCLEX exam, and obtain a job. So I think a lot of the information that the most important tidbits of finishing nursing school, I wish I had more information on, rather than kind of like through self-discovery. I mean, it wasn't a very big deal, but I think it just would have been helpful when I finished nursing school.
Yeah, I think that's a good point where, some programs have formal mentoring programs where they kind of match and pair people, but there's nothing stopping folks from reaching out and finding their own kind of alumni, senior students, or people who are further ahead of them, and ask questions, right? So to get that information. And I'd encourage folks to do that instead of just waiting to be kind of spoon-fed everything there. And hopefully they'll put it into the curriculum and put it into the program or whatever. But in lieu of that, and in spite of that, make sure you do find those people, ideally whose job that you want, the people who are doing the things that you want to be doing, and then hear it from them of what it's really like, what advice they would have. So that you can really tailor that to yourself. So I think that's a lot of amazing information, and I think it's going to help a lot of folks that are going through nursing school. And I know I learned a lot, and even though I'm not going to go into nursing school, but you never know. I mean, it's one of those things.
Yeah, you might change your mind. Yeah,
I might change my mind because I have a lot of years left, so maybe. But yeah, thanks for sharing your wisdom, and hopefully we'll have you back to talk a little bit more about. You mentioned kind of the NCLEX exam and other things that would help folks to really prepare themselves for a career in nursing.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure as always.
Perfect. Thanks, Eram. Take care.
All right, you too.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.